All right. All right. Thank you for attending, and I'll try to get right to the point. Alpha 2 Learning Systems is a blended program. We do incorporate technology. Oops. Sorry, my computer is being slow. Just a brief history. The company's been around since 1969. It was born out of Kirshner Associates, which was a consulting firm. They did a lot of research for the government. They did a big research program paper on Head Start. And then what happened, how Alpha 2 came into being was around the time where special ed became inclusion rather than seclusion. So the consultants from Kirshner thought of an idea. They wanted to make classroom management help instructors meet the individual needs of their students in the classroom. So they came up with this management idea. And that's how Alpha 2 came into being. Some of the keys to success is we incorporate diagnostics for realistic placement. That way, students will enter the program at a realistic and comfortable level. Teachers will have the modules all set up after the diagnostic process is done. Each student will have a prescription. So you can have, this really helps with differentiated learning. Students will work in, what we offer are primarily reading, language arts, and an assortment of math material. We incorporate multi-leveled readers. They start off somewhere around first grade or second grade reading levels and plateau around 9th or 10th grade reading levels. They really focus on key components of reading comprehension, main idea, context clues, phonics, inferences. And then our math library is, we own the rights to that. We have a basic math program, number and operations, measurement, geometry, data probability, algebra, and also some math help topics that really help strengthen the number and operations curriculum. And our platform is very customizable. We can, as teachers have worked with a program, they've given us ideas that, hey, could you create some tests, maybe covering civics? And we did that. We work with Kent ISD, Oogie Lamar's program, dealing with ESL levels 1 and 2. And what I did was I utilized the immigrations test criteria, and we adapted that to our database. So we have some multiple choice questions, test items for folks that are trying to become citizens, and then also open-ended questions test that help them. Our math, I think, is very solid. I'll get more into that later. But the Fordham review, they went through 50 states when Common Core came into being, and when they looked at Michigan standards, we actually came out very well compared to Common Core. So we had a very good library going into that. As I mentioned, the first step to getting students placed into the program are diagnostics. This allows the instructor to know where the student is when they walk into the classroom, what knowledge they're bringing. And it's very non-threatening. Anytime they take a screening or a diagnostic, the instructions are just to let the students know that they don't have to know every question on the test. It's not a pass or fail kind of thing. And that way it will place them at the appropriate module. So as soon as the diagnostic is done, each student will have their own prescription. Instructor and the student will know exactly what they'll be working in. and it'll be very comfortable too. They would have to guess and get things right to be placed higher than they should. So that rarely happens. Our management system helps score the diagnostics, create those prescriptions, scores the criterion mastery test as a student works through the prescription. They'll work through the daily work, and then we'll take them to a criterion mastery test, summative test. And then from there, as students master those tests, they will automatically be placed at the next module. Instructors will know if they didn't pass the test, they'll know exactly what questions they missed, and more importantly, not only what questions they missed, but what those questions align to and what standard. So you can really focus on areas of weakness. This helps maximize the teaching process. And then from there, as the students work through the program, administrators will have access to individual and group reports, the mastery test. Then there's a student strand gain, which I'll show here after a little bit. What helps is evaluation is ongoing from the minute students take the diagnostic. They're going to be placed on those prescriptions. The prescription is more of a daily evaluation. They work in their daily assignments. We recommend maybe 80% or better to be proficient. And that way it will set them up for success on their mastery test. On every mastery test, we test a minimum of 4 questions per standard. So a student could realistically score 80% on a test and not master it because he or she may have missed 2 out of 4 questions pertaining to a specific standard. Once they do master it, the system will automatically bump them up to the next module. And here are some references, what I call alpha friends. Here, many of you probably know some of the folks here. That just gives you an idea of who's using the program here in Michigan and elsewhere out in Massachusetts and at the Nebraska Indian Community College. They're utilizing alpha to help those individuals that are coming in the classroom that need work on their foundational skills so they can actually work up to mastering and passing the GED test. So if anybody has any questions, please let me know. Oops.
I don't see any in the Zoom chat right now.
So this is what the dashboard of the alpha system looks like. The instructor will see all the users in here. This is just a alpha test classroom. Actually, I'm going to show you, we did a summer school program in Massachusetts just this past summer, helping with elementary, middle school students in reading and math.
We did get a question in. How long are the diagnostic tests?
Question. With the reading, it starts with a screener, and that's a list of 40 words. And next to each one of those words, the student is to pick the antonym. This gives a ballpark of their vocabulary. Again, they don't need to answer every question. We encourage them to stop if they don't even know that word that they're trying to identify the antonym for. From there, they're going to be placed into one of 4 diagnostic levels. If they place in the diagnostic levels 1 and 2, they definitely could use some help brushing up on their reading skills for sure. If they place in the 4, they're up there. They're toward the end of the alpha spectrum, so to speak. The math is that's very short too. The diagnostics for the number and operations, the instructor will place them at the appropriate level, maybe based on their CASAS test, TABE, whatever they have, whatever they're taking when they register. So if you see somebody that's maybe a 3.6, I would suggest starting off at the book 3 diagnostic, and then from there, once they don't master diagnostic, they're placed into the module. But they're very short, maybe 8 to 10 questions. Okay. So, like I said, this was a summer school program. I just had some data here, some reports that will give you a good idea of how Alpha can help you and show some student success here. So I'm going to look at Peyton. Here, she took the reading screening test. From there, she placed into that diagnostic level 2. Right here, you'll see this diagnostic had 16 questions, and that's, like I said, the screener will have 40 vocabulary words, and then I think maybe the max is 18 questions, maybe on that diagnostic 4. So, and then once she took that diagnostic, she received a prescription. Here in the reports menu, you can select the curriculum. We're going to select reading. Select Peyton. This is her prescription. These are some of the strands that we use using context, getting the main idea, the phonics word study, drawing conclusions. The new practice reader strand, that kind of synthesizes all those specific skill series books, which is the following directions, those from SRA. And new practice reader is from Phoenix Learning. So as they get more confident, if you have some real low level folks that are placing the books A and B, you want to work on like the finding details, the phonics, those areas to build up those skills before they get involved with context clues or drawing conclusions. And one nice thing about the prescription is the instructor will know exactly what grade level the students place into those strands. So the test codes here next to the module, the last 2 numbers indicate grade level. So she's working, between the 5th and 6th grade reading levels here. And then this report is pretty nice. It will show you where she placed in the program at the very beginning and where she is now. And mind you, this was a short session. It ran about 5 weeks. But here you can see this will tell you she placed in drawing conclusions at book E, and she was 6th grade reading level. As she worked through her prescription, she took 1 test over book E, and it's usually 2 mastery tests over a level. And she made, as you can see here, a half a grade gain. So it tells you, again, where she placed into the program, where she is now, and the gains. The average grade when she placed in there was 5.57. Now it's 6.36, and the average gain of 1.1. So not too bad for a short amount of time. And they focus primarily on the number and operation strand. So in the number and operations curriculum, there are 3 strands: meaning, number relationships, and fluency. So she placed into book 2, 2nd grade level, and she did a lot more work in the math than she did the reading. That's what the teachers are focusing on. So it goes in order: meaning, number, relationships, and fluency. So she is now, by the time she was done with the summer school program, she was completely done with books 2 and 3 for meaning and number relationships. And she just had one more module to work in fluency of book 3. Then everything she'd be working in book 4 completely at that point. So she did a great job in a short amount of time again. So we have, when somebody's set up with an alpha classroom program, you will have hard copies of the books. Again, we've got books K through 8 for number and operations. There's geometry. We have measurement and algebra. And then also this, the instructor will be able to print off those pages from the books. So here, if the teacher wanted to email Peyton's parents the actual pages, they could do that. So this shows you that complete module for number relationships found within that number and operations book. And it will tell you the code number and what that code represents, what the standards are. And then this is their login. Once they receive their login and password, and they have the prescription, they'll be able to log in on the instructor's directions and take the test online. And if they do not master it, it will lock that test. That way, students aren't taking tests over and over and using process of elimination to master it. Any questions so far?
I don't see any other questions in the chat.
I don't see any there.
All right. And then how Heather and I met, it was in 2019 at the McKay conference when she and her math instructor, Ann, had a breakout session talking about how they identified specific standards for math for students to pass the GED math test. And I was looking at their handouts, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen. And so we did an alignment to our standards found within our modules. And we probably aligned to 80% of those standards, which was really nice. And then whatever standards we didn't have alignment to, I hired Michigan math teachers to write content for those. And so what we did was we created our worksheets as well. We isolated those standards found within the modules that how they're an and identified, and we created our own worksheets from those modules. And so we have a kit of hanging file folders with tabs identifying those standards, and the worksheets. So here in the modules menu on the dashboard, if there are any documents associated with those modules, such as here's our absolute value. This is a student version and the answer key. So we highly recommend having the student's email address as a login. That way, if some folks are working offsite as they do, you can send them that PDF. And with the worksheets, our math teachers did a great job, just like Ann and Heather have done. They explain what absolute value is, provides examples with the answers for the student, multiple examples, and then allows them to apply their newly acquired knowledge and hopefully be successful in answering these questions.
Can I say something for a minute, John?
Sure thing.
So for those of you, so I'm sure some of you were on my session with Ann yesterday where we talked through our worksheets. So I just want to kind of give you guys insight, like you just saw in that absolute value one. You know, John's got a lot of stuff here, right? There's a lot of questions, practice, all of that. Where our worksheets we made to be one page, efficient, you know, not a lot of practice. So where we would use this is our stuff is really made for those, you know, roughly 9th through 12th grade students. We do go back a little bit into that ABE content, but where our worksheets are short, we've worked with John to make sure that, like, if I have a student who's just really not getting absolute value, we can go into Alpha, assign that student to this, and then the teachers don't have to create new lessons on absolute value. They can use what John's already created here and use that as like the backup. So when we always go in, you know, assess people with GED ready and say, okay, where are they at in terms of the GED? Then we give them our stuff. And if that's not enough still, we then go into Alpha and say, here, this is, you know, lower level content, it builds up and there's, you know, very specific modules and specific content. So it's really easy to then say, okay, you're not getting this off this worksheet that we made. Let's back it up and see what Alpha tells you need to do to get to that point. So there's my tidbit.
No, thank you. And in fact, I met with Heather's teacher Brian last week, stopped into one of the sites, and as many of you know, we were just talking about how it's nice to have layers to meet everybody's needs when they come through the class, into your classroom and into your program. There's a frustration level if they don't know a standard and they're feeling overwhelmed. You know, we try to be a solution for that to go down. So I put this document in the booth handouts. And what this does is this just goes through all the worksheets that are available for number sense, algebra, geometry, and the miscellaneous. So here, like comparing fractions and decimals, we have parts 1 and 2. Again, we isolated that standard from our modules, which this one, part 1, came from the number and operations book 5 and in the number relationships strand. Part 2 came from the number and operations book 8 in the meaning strand. So you can drill down, and you can drill down even further than that. So if they're having trouble with the comparing fractions decimals worksheet, you might want to go earlier, place them in a module found prior to that number of relationships, the meaning. You can bounce around. You can even, and I would suggest maybe even giving them the diagnostic for number and operations book 5. There's lots of options for the teacher. There's, I know there's probably a lot of folks that have tired of hearing so-called consultants saying there's only one way to do things. That's not it. What Alpha does is we provide you with a comfortable management system and allow you to make the decisions for students, because it's not a one-size-fit-all for everybody. So this is what this document just shows. If we just have a worksheet, we just have a worksheet, but it does provide them examples and provides them a clear understanding of what exponents it would be, and then sets them up for open-ended questions. So, yeah, I highly recommend if you can get the handout, or if you want me to send you one, I'll be more than happy to. But again, here it goes through the algebra standards.
And so just in case it wasn't clear, each of these where it says area and circumference of circles worksheet, each of these is aligned to the Sparta math curriculum that we shared out a link of yesterday. And when I'm not talking, I can share it out in the chat again. So these directly align with like, okay, someone's not getting it on this worksheet for us. And then we can go back to this and say, here's the book that we need from John's curriculum to help them get to that point.
And then also another diagnostic, or another way you can help place students appropriately, is you can set them up for the mastery test. You can bypass a diagnostic if you want and say, I want to see how this student does in the mastery test for spatial reasoning for geometry book 8. And if they don't pass it, you're going to know not only what questions they missed, but what standards that were aligned to those questions. And then when they come back to that test, after you unlock that test for them, and you think they're ready for it, it will only show the questions that they missed. They don't have to redo the whole test.
So we do have a few questions in the chat. Do you want me to read those out?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of reorder these here. So are there instructional lessons online, and is it self-paced?
It's self-paced. The instruction actually just still comes from the instructor. What we did to strengthen the number and operations curriculum, we created help topics. And these are guides. We have booklets already set up. Show you. And these kind of complement, or they're very similar to those worksheets where they provide, let's see here. So we have help topics for decimals, fractions, percents, and proportions and ratios and proportions. And again, you can print individual pages if you don't need the whole booklet and you want to email a student or print for a student if they're having trouble solving problems with fractions. You'd only have to print out pages 41 to 46. So you can see this is scaffolded very well. Logical, sequential order. So here it starts off with vocabulary for the student. And then it gets into adding like fractions. Again, this help topic is we have fractions and mixed numbers, fractions addition and subtraction, and fractions multiplication and division. All separate, each book separate. So here it sets them up, shows them how to add fractions. Again, more examples with the answer, step by step. And this was, a lot of this content was recommended by folks that have been using Alpha for a while. Linda Kowalski, who was down in Livonia, Karen Ling's night teacher. During the day, she's bouncing around a couple buildings, teaching art, some other classes. And then she comes to the adult ed site and she said, sometimes I need a refresher on how to multiply or add fractions. So, we listen to the needs of the instructor, and we hired math teachers to do this for us, and they did a wonderful job. Like one of our math teachers recently retired, but she'd been working in Title I special ed, so she's very good about making sure she's very detail oriented. And then the instructors that have been using Alpha for a while were just very pleased in getting these help topics, again, to help complement the number and operations curriculum. And then at the end of each of these help topic booklets, there is a chapter review, so to speak. So you could even give the students a chapter review first, print these out and see how well they do. And then you could really pinpoint which areas in the help topic booklet that you could focus on.
All right, I see a question directed at me. So it says, do you give your students the GED ready test first to see where they are? So yeah, Nancy, we do give the GED ready upfront to determine, I mean, that's our best tool to determine if they're ready to take a GED test. And then what we would do from there is, I mean, you can kind of tell based on their GED ready score, we can make the determination if, you know, they're getting a 144, 140-ish in math on the GED ready, we could just give them our curriculum, which I did put a link to in the chat for anyone that wants to check that out. But then if they get like a 125, 130, something lower where we're like, okay, they're going to need some work here, we could either give them our stuff or we can give them access to Alpha 2, because we know they're going to be lower than probably some of the content we're presenting. It's all a teacher decision, right? I don't tell my teachers when they should and when they shouldn't. They've all been doing this long enough. So what I would say is the link I put in the chat to the curriculum is probably for, you're asking about grade levels. I would say some people that are 6th through 8th grade could get through it, and that would be enough to get them, but it's all going to be kind of dependent on like reading level and those sorts of things too. So the link in the chat is going to be higher level than what Alpha 2 has, but that's where they work great in partnership here, you know, where we've got the higher level, and this is a real good opportunity to have curriculum that's already there. You don't have to design lessons. They're already all on there for those lower level, if they're anywhere below, you know, that 8th grade level. And then there is one other question that we could either answer. I'll throw it out there to you, John, see if it says, is the program price based on number of students using it? What's a ballpark price?
Great question. Everybody's kind of individually priced. I need to know your needs. If it's going to be, it's not so much per pupil as it is settings. So if you have maybe two, like Heather has 2 sites where they utilize Alpha, I have no control over the price of those publisher books. So I need to take into account, you know, what your needs are, and then I can customize a proposal for you. The math is all proprietary, so that I have control over. It would be, I mean, just to let you know, under $10,000 for sure. You know, sometimes 5, you know, it just depends. The travel involved, how many people I need to train, that kind of thing. And materials, again, because it's blended, you won't need all the, you know, a bunch of books, so to speak. You'll have worksheets, you'll have the access to PDFs to email. So great question. And it's all, you know, it just depends on individuals because it is blended.
And it, you know, with us, I can give you guys a little insight here. Oh, somebody's asked, is it annual renewal? And I can speak to that. Yes, we've done an annual invoice with John, but the way we started it too, I mean, I don't want to put words in John's mouth here, hopefully, but we started out with like, let's just use the math. And then we eased into like, let's do math and reading, and let's do this at one site and then see how it goes. And then we added 2. So we kind of did this like scaled implementation of it, where we weren't using it day one across the board. It's, you know, $8,000 or anything. And I'll say John's really easy to work with, flexible, talking through what the best options are and all of that. And then I just love that every time I have like, hey, I have this idea, you could do this thing in your system. He's very responsive and like, that's a great idea. We should do that. So it's kind of, it's different than I would say working with John in Alpha 2 is a very different experience than working, you know, where you're buying, you know, Edgenuity software and you send in, I want this stuff, and they send you an invoice and you're like, great, I'll figure it out. It's much more personalized in this, and just the way it's set up, it can be, all the content can be personalized for our students as well.
Thank you. And yeah, and I highly recommend if you're chatting with some of the folks besides Heather, that was on the Friends of Alpha, Karen Ling at Livonia, Kendall McVicker from Southgate. They've just been doing a great job. Joel Hoppa from White Lake Community Ed. Yeah, they're great references, and with this system, with the way the platform is, it's very customizable. So I'm always open to new ideas, new content to help you deliver and meet the needs of your individual students. That's for sure. Again, I was so happy to sit in on Heather's breakout session 2 years ago at Crystal, because we do some work with the Nebraska Indian Community College, like I mentioned before, and they were ecstatic when I brought them our worksheets, our new worksheet kit. That was so beneficial to them. So again, thank you, Heather and Ann, for having that breakout session. It just added more value to our program. One thing I do want to show is, as I mentioned, when a student doesn't master a test, they will be locked out of it. That way, the instructor can find out exactly what the problem was, what questions they missed, and then all they have to do is unlock it after they sit down with the student and really focus on the weakness. And here, again, I mentioned that we test a minimum of 4 questions per standard. Sometimes there's more, but right here, it lets instructor know student missed questions 10 through 12. What was on that test? What standard was that? And then they can go back and kind of reteach that and focus on that standard. And then we also have like a set B. So we'll have, let's say, book 4 of number and operations, or book 7 for number and operations and fluency. And then we have a set B where it has the same standards, but different worded questions. Or the teacher can just sit down and do one-on-one, however they want to try to facilitate. Again, we just try to give as many resources as possible, and as much information to the instructor so you can make those data-driven decisions. And then our newest thing, and it's not quite done yet. I'd say next week the finishing touches should be done, maybe even by today. We created flashcards, digital flashcards. I just started uploading some content to the civics, and this is all the criteria from the U.S. Immigration Services. Have the criteria to help individuals pass their immigration test. So I took the exact wording. What is the supreme law of the land? The Constitution. So what's going to be new is they're going to be, instead of these buttons here, there's going to be arrows right here going back and forth. And then also there's going to be an actual numbering. So if there's, let's say there's 25 cards in a deck, the student will know, okay, I'm on 20 of 25. So that's going to be the newest thing, but you get in a good idea. And what you can do is, whenever flashcards are created, a deck, you can assign students this deck. And then when they log in to take their test, they will also see a flashcard up in their dashboard. When a student logs in, they'll just see test and flashcards, and that way they can practice on their own. And there's, I think, just so many uses for like math vocabulary. I sat in on Heather and Ann's breakout session yesterday, and as soon as this is ready, I'm going to be uploading more content, math vocabulary. Besides the civics, I'm going to take some of the information. Oh, and the language arts vocabulary definitions. I was visiting Romulus, Renee Gowan's site 2 weeks ago, and happened to see a worksheet that had vocabulary and definitions for language arts. So I started uploading this. So I thought, besides just a piece of paper, if a student wants to practice at home, they can log in and go through their flashcards on the Alpha system. So that's brand new. Yeah, that's about all I have for you guys.
Heather, there's a few more questions in the chat. Did you want to go through those?
Sure, please.
I only see one, Whitney. Are you in another chat that has other questions? Why don't you go through them?
Okay, did we talk about the annual renewal?
Yeah, it's annual. The first year, if you're getting a reading, if you're incorporating reading with the math, the second year it won't be quite as expensive because you won't have the publisher cost. There might be a few books that might need to be replacing. But yep, it's an annual renewal.
And are you the developer of the program?
Yes.
There's also over on the Whova side, I don't see anything in the chat, but there was in the Q&A, there was a question from Carrie Price. Carrie, did you want to ask your question here, or I'm not sure if that was maybe posted beforehand?
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I did see that. Yeah, if she wants to ask that again, I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm not sure which question. I asked a bunch. I guess I was wondering whether there were online modules to go along with it. You answered that question. And then I was curious about the length of the assessments, which you answered that question. So then my last question was, can we have a link in the chat so that we can reach out to you if this is something that we're want to explore further?
Yeah, absolutely. In my email address, my phone number is all in there. Yeah, and one thing too, when I was attending the presentation yesterday, Heather's presentation, you guys talked about the language arts handouts and talking about specifically main idea. That is one of our strands. What you could do is what I was going to suggest to Ann and Karen, now that they do have the Alpha program, to get a student placed into the reading program by the screener and diagnostic, and you could focus specifically on that main idea strand. They could do the test. They wouldn't even have to get into the book right away. They could take the first mastery test that's found in the prescription and practice with that. And what's nice about it is it's going to be at the appropriate reading level. So not only will you can focus on a specific skill like context clues, main idea inferences, but it's going to be at an appropriate level. And then as they do master the test, their reading levels are going to go up. And that's where you can, where I was showing you the strand gain report earlier. Anyone else?
Feel free to unmute too if you have questions. Heather, do you have anything else you want to add?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, thank you guys for this great presentation to both of you. And it looks like our next thing that we have lunch from 12 to 12:30. And then 12:30 to 1:30 is the awards and networking. So make sure you come back and join us from 12:30 to 1:30. Everybody had an entry for a basket too. So just by joining the conference, you're entered into those baskets. So you definitely want to check that out. And then there should also be an email coming for sketches. So keep an eye on that. Like I said, I'm going to do mine today because I will forget, but I hope you all enjoy your lunch and join us for networking. I will see you then. Thanks.
Thank you, Whitney. Thank you, Heather.